Hi everyone, welcome to episode 82 of the Startup Playbook podcast. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they use to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. My guest for this episode is James Mckinnon. James is an angel investor, having invested in companies such as Expert360, Airly, and ResponSight, and he's also the founder of his own startup, Sittr, which is Australia's #1 marketplace for babysitters and nannies. In this episode, we spoke about a range of topics, including the characteristics that investors look for in founders, the supply and demand of marketplaces, using PR for growth, the importance of customer experience, and when to outsource versus having in-house development. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, James. Welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great.
It's a pleasure to meet you in person.
Thanks.
So for those people that may not be as familiar with you or your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Yeah, sure. So I've always been into technology. So I started programming when I was about 8. I got handed a computer and a book and told to learn, which was fun and really got me excited about that. So I've always, I had a career in technology. I worked for HP for quite a number of years in the corporate space, everything from, being a sysadmin to enterprise sales. So I got a wide range of experience through that. But then around 2013, I decided that it was time for a change. I didn't like being in that corporate environment anymore. I felt quite restless. So decided to get into the venture space, and I figured the best way to learn how to do that was to make some angel investments. So with a couple of other partners, we went out and we started a company called Mckinnon Capital, which was doing kind of seed angel stage deals, and we did a number of those, including Expert360, Token One, and Airly was the latest one that we did. And then through that process, I also started to get interested in maybe founding a company as well, as a way to be a better investor and to learn kind of both sides of the table. So in late 2015, I teamed up with my wife and we launched an app called Sittr, which helps parents find trusted, reliable childcare.
Really interesting story, and obviously I want to dive into a little bit into kind of both sides of the market that you've been on. But
Sure.
I guess from a starting point, really interesting to know or to kind of hear that your approach of kind of learning was to get into the venture side and angel investing generally. Yep. What was that like? I guess coming from a corporate background to I guess transferring that into ventures and angel investing.
Yeah, so I think you'll see if you look at kind of most of my investments, they've all kind of got a bit of an enterprise focus, more so than consumer. So Expert360 was very much in the consulting space, selling to big businesses. So that was really attractive to me because I kind of understood the market that they were disrupting, and I could see the big potential there. I think Australia is a great place for enterprise startups because our corporations are pretty easily accessible as well in terms of partnerships and selling into. So there's a lot of good companies to invest in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons why we're bringing down Axela price to Australia later this year. I don't know if you know too much about that, but
Yep.
we're bringing down an enterprise B2B SaaS accelerator,
Yep.
which I agree. Like I think Australia historically has had such a strong track record as well in the B2B enterprise space.
Yep.
That it kind of makes sense. But I guess what was it about those particular companies? So you mentioned Airly, Token One, Expert360. From your perspective, that wanted you to get behind them and invest in them?
So, I mean, it came down really to two things because at the point that I invested, none of them had revenue. So, we weren't looking at, CAC and LTV and that kind of stuff. It was all about the founders and their passion and their vision and whether I could see the opportunity that they were going after and whether I kind of had an affiliation for that as well.
What was it specifically that you were looking for in the founding teams? Because obviously that's something that a lot of sort of investors talk about is,
Yep.
we're looking at the founders. What's kind of a I guess a tangible characteristic or things that you're kind of hoping to screen through that process?
Definitely, one is, do they have an affiliation with the problem that they're trying to solve, or is it more opportunistic?
Mm-hmm.
I think if they've felt the pain themselves, then they're usually a lot more passionate about solving it. So passion is one of them. Resilience. So I'd like to see, kind of how many times in the past, and it may not be starting another company, but it could just be through, working in corporate or something like that, where have they been knocked down and gotten straight back up? Because being a founder is like that every second day.
Yeah.
And there's so many opportunities along the road where you can just give up. But those founders that just keep pushing on are the ones that usually come out the other side and are most successful.
From I guess now that you've been on sort of both sides of the market as well, or both sides of the space, what is it that founders should look for in investors as well? Especially since, with getting capital or getting funding is a difficult process, but
yeah.
Obviously if you've got a couple of different options on the table, how should founders kind of think about doing that, and what should they look for in that dynamic or that relationship?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's got to be someone that you feel comfortable working really closely with, because there will be good times and bad times, and you don't want someone who is your best friend in the good times and then your worst enemy in the bad times. You need, when things are looking down, you need someone who's going to pick you up and put you on the right track and keep you motivated to keep going. So that would be the biggest one for me. And I think, you can get insights from, just spending a bit of time with that investor. I think the terms they propose is a big indicator of that as well. Too many onerous terms to wanting to own too much of the company. I think those are all massive red flags that if things don't start going well, then there's going to be, this is not going to be someone that you want to be on the wrong side of.
Sure. And so obviously you kind of made that decision to start your own startup as well with your partner.
Yep.
What was that transition like? Because obviously it's usually the other way around, which is, people wanting to start their own startups. And how did your experience as an angel investor, I guess, help, or what were some of the lessons that you took into starting your own company?
I think I really learned, I guess, to be patient, not to rush it. So, we're actually bootstrapped to date.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of spent the first 12 months, really working closely with a small number of customers to understand, what their needs were and how we could better solve those needs before, really putting our foot on the accelerator and going for it. And it, it's kind of only been in the last 6 months that things have really started to snowball from that. And I think that process, I think if you just read the tech crunches and the startup dailies, then you have a very altered view of what startup life is, and that it's this, you come up with an idea and you launch something and you go raise money and it's just like sprint. But I think looking at the companies I've invested in, it is up and down, and it's okay if you have, a bad month, or, it's okay if one of your metrics is not looking good, as long as you kind of have an idea of why that is, or you have the inclination to go and dig into it and find out what that is, as opposed to just giving up. Those are kind of the things I've seen in those companies that I've invested in, and that's kind of what I try and do in Sittr as well.
Absolutely. I think what you touched on is something that I'm a big advocate of as well. Is it's not all about the fundraising every month, and just there are a lot of downs that go through that process, and it is a long process as well. I guess one of the challenges for founders can be, how do you sort of overcome a lot of those periods? Because I don't think that we talk about them enough.
Yep.
But how do you, I guess, survive long enough? So you mentioned, the last 6 months has seen a dramatic kind of shift in the business.
Yep.
From what I understand, Sittr's been around for a while as well, a couple of years.
Yep.
How do kind of founders stick around long enough to see that upside coming through?
Well, yeah, I mean, it really comes back to that passion as well. I mean, if you're not really passionate about what you're doing, then if you go out and you talk to 10 investors and they all say no, it's much easier to say, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe there's really nothing here. No one else kind of believes in it. But I think if you're really passionate about solving a particular issue, then you could go out and speak to 100 investors that say no and still keep going. I think that's one of the big things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess going back to Sittr, so do you want to give a short pitch again for people that maybe aren't as familiar with the startup?
Yeah, so Sittr is currently Australia's largest curated marketplace for babysitters and nannies. So what we do is we make life easier for parents by verifying all the carers on the platform. So they're all over 18, they all have senior first aid qualifications, they all have background checks, and they all have an identity check, and all our bookings are covered by public liability insurance as well. So we had the first kind of marketplace-based childcare public liability insurance policy, potentially anywhere in the world. Yeah. Which was really important to us. So it's kind of like I guess an agency type service that have been around forever, but the technology platform that we've built it on means that we're able to scale it much faster, much broader, all over Australia, overseas, and we can do it at a fraction of the cost of paying an agency as well. Fantastic.
I mean, obviously, marketplaces are one of kind of the most popular sort of business models for Australian founders. But,
yep.
If you get it right, a company like Envato, exceptionally lucrative and really big opportunity.
Yep.
But it can be very difficult to get to that point as well. And one of, I guess, the bigger challenges is always the chicken and the egg in terms of, do I focus more on, how do I sort of go about in building out that marketplace? What was the approach that you took with Sittr?
Yeah, so I think the chicken and egg problem is kind of a little bit overstated. So I think if you break it down, you can't start a marketplace unless you have supply. So our approach was, well, we need to go and get supply. Yeah. There's always the argument that, if you have supply and no demand, the supply will disappear. But I think it's more likely that if you have demand and no supply, then the demand will definitely disappear and never come back. The supply side, they're usually willing to try something new if it means they're going to earn some money. And in a lot of cases, especially with Sittr, they can sign up, create their profile, and they don't have to do anything there until the jobs start coming in. So there was no real barrier for them to just sign up and wait for us to be ready to launch. And we were very clear with them that we're signing up carers at the moment, and we have parents coming in the next couple of months, and that worked quite well. We also found, like, right at the start that our carers were willing to travel great distances for jobs as well. So we didn't have to be hyper local, which means we could launch in a city with kind of 20 carers, and we'd have quite a really wide coverage. As opposed to going suburb by suburb. So we actually pretty much launched on the eastern seaboard all at once.
I guess kind of moving on from the launch then, does that change at all in terms of your focus, in terms of the way that you focus on marketing or growing the business as things kind of develop and grow over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant battle, kind of managing the supply and demand after that. It's a bit like climbing a ladder, right? They'll never always be in sync, but they're always, notching up together. So, we do kind of, try to, we don't advertise in areas where we definitely don't have any supply at the moment, which is, mostly just regional areas at the moment. We do focus on the cities to manage that. And, we do, at the moment, we do have a good mix. there's been cases where it's been a little bit out of sync, but we know, as long as we know where we can get new supply quickly, then it's easy to go out and you can fix that issue pretty quick.
Yeah, I guess like an interesting part of that would be just kind of understanding is there a way that you track that or kind of forward plan those things? So one of the things that you just mentioned was knowing where to go if you need that additional thing. So how much kind of forward planning goes into that process?
A little bit, but not a lot, unless there's a particular region that we want to launch in. So we were very early on, we're in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, but we saw an opportunity on the Sunshine Coast as well. So because we had seen some demand come in from that, we weren't able to fulfill it. So we did go out and recruit in that area, particularly. Similarly, when we wanted to launch in Canberra, for example, we had planned that months in advance and went and recruited the carers before that.
Sure. So again, earlier in the episode, you mentioned that the last 6 months has kind of seen a significant shift in the business. I guess can you share what has led or what's kind of changed to have that sort of that larger impact over the last 6 months?
Yeah. So one of the big things that has really been positive for us is getting some PR. So I guess in our space, trust is really important. So getting kind of, this third party kind of endorsement, whether it's, a spot on the Today Show or, a feature by Apple in the App Store, those things really help to convince people that this is kind of a legitimate business. It's not some random app where the developers are overseas and there's no kind of controls and support. So, we really did, as we started to, it kind of kicked off where Apple got in contact with us and put us forward for an article in news.com.au back in March 2017. And we got a really good bump from that. So then kind of towards the middle of 2017, we started to invest more in PR and found it to be, really good for us, a really good fit for our company.
Again, obviously being focused around growth, myself personally, I guess the two questions would be, is there any particular strategy or approach that you take with PR? And is there anything that you do to track the effectiveness of PR campaigns that are being run?
Yeah, so we try to make our PR really authentic. So, and we worked with, two really good agencies. But it's really about not just, getting in one publication to say that, this app is launched and things like that. So we wanted to target the publications where parents go and where parents look for advice. And then to create the story around, these are the founders and this is why they did it, and they're parents themselves, and so they know the pain that you're going through. So use Sittr because it's made for you by people just like you, and that seems to have resonated quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that's often overlooked about PR is from a publication standpoint, they're looking to have a story that's compelling to their readers, and from a reader's perspective, they want to find something that's engaging for them, not necessarily something that you want to tell them.
Yep.
So I think that approach that you just mentioned about kind of translating that you were similar to your audience and this is an app that you sort of created as well makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and if you can get a user to kind of talk to a journalist and vouch for it as well, that goes even further. Yep. Than kind of the self-promotion type stories.
Exactly, and that kind of there's a lot of talk about how I guess journalists or the media generally tend to cover launches or funding rounds or those sort of things. I think for PR to really work, it needs to be consistent, and a big way of doing that is kind of sharing stories, as you just mentioned, of users actually using your product.
Yep. As
a way to subtly market what you're doing versus just trying to announce feature launches, which, to be honest, no one really is fussed about.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of credit to the advice that a lot of startup founders get around, don't invest in PR too early. I think that's kind of translated a little bit to, never invest in PR, which I think is wrong. I think it comes to a point where, the product is ready. There are enough features there. It is starting to get organic product market fit. That's when PR can really give a huge boost.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned as well, from a marketplace dynamic of not being bound to specific locations, PR probably made a bit more sense for you as well, because you don't really control the distribution of that.
Yep.
And you can take
Yeah,
advantage
absolutely.
So I guess, again, sort of really curious for anyone who's listening, who's currently running a marketplace or thinking about running a marketplace, what are some of the lessons or things that you picked up that you weren't necessarily expecting, or people don't necessarily talk about in building marketplaces?
That's a great question.
Sorry to completely throw you on the spot.
No, that's okay. You know what? I spend a lot more time doing customer service than I thought I would. And I think the reason that we realized that that's so important is that, I think when people are moving to, a tech-enabled marketplace, they kind of lose a connection with the business a little bit, as opposed to, going to a local business and things like that. So we try to recreate that a little bit. So, you can message us directly in the app, things like that, and we're always available to kind of, answer any questions, whether how big or how small they are, so that people know that, they're really, yes, they're using an app, but they're really dealing with, a real company and real people behind it who care about it. So I think, don't just launch a tech product and say, okay, well, supply, demand, you guys connect and go. Like, do whatever you can to make both sides feel that, you're earning your commission by helping to make those connections easier.
Absolutely. And I guess just coming back to the true value for marketplace, it's that community that you're developing. It's not just about the connection, but it's actually the entire community that you're building. It's hard to build a community unless if you actually engage with people. That's right.
And, any marketplace, the last thing you want is to just connect those two people and then for them to go and connect, in real life every other time. You want them to come back and connect through your platform every single time. So getting into that kind of transaction process and making people know that it's really kind of a third party, a three people connection there. It helps them to come back and, book again through Sittr instead of just, calling up the carer and saying, can you just come over on these days?
Absolutely. And I guess one of the I just having had a look at Sittr as well, there are so many different components and so many different decisions that need to be made when you're running a startup. One of the things that I kind of noticed with Sittr is that it's primarily a iOS and Android app. Was there a strategic reason or a reason why you decided to go down being sort of mobile first or mobile only versus having a more of a web platform?
Well, we do have a web platform as well, and there's pros and cons of each. But I think we're very much moving or have moved towards doing everything on mobile. And in terms of engagement between users, it's much higher in a mobile app than it is on a desktop website. Excuse me. So yeah, having the app was really important to us. You get push notifications, you get location services, you get app store distribution. On the other hand, on the web, you get huge benefits from SEO, and especially in a marketplace where you can have your directory indexed by Google as well for localized searches, which is something that we do have, and we get a lot of organic traffic from. But our main goal at that point is to then get them from the website to the app, because it's a much better, more native experience.
Yeah, I was about to say as well. I think generally driving people to download an app straight away for a marketplace would be difficult. But yeah, makes total sense to get people to the website first and then use that as a way to.
Yeah, and it's easier on the web to educate people about the product because you have very limited space and capabilities to do that in the app. But yeah.
Yeah. So again, like I know we kind of briefly we kind of spoke about this a little bit earlier, but really curious because you're both investing actively at the moment, kind of.
Kind of, not as much.
Sure.
Yep.
So you're still kind of investing, but you also have your startup at the same time. So from my perspective, again, really curious to know, has your approach to investing at all changed from having gone through the Sittr experience? Or vice versa? Like, are there sort of learnings that you're taking from having done both that you're sort of applying to the other aspect, or have a different lens?
Yeah, look, I think I've really realized how important product is. So, one of the things that I do look for now is around product-focused founders. Do they have the capability to build an app that Apple will want to feature? Because we've been featured by Apple quite a few times, and it means hundreds of thousands of eyeballs on your app kind of per week when you're on that front page of the App Store. And I think it's an area where a lot of Australian founders are not focused on. A lot of Australian investors are not focused on, but it makes such a huge difference. It can be the difference between a company that can just push sales for a couple of years and then kind of plateau to something that's kind of building long-lasting growth. So yeah, I'm really looking for the product-focused people at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is terrible. I can't remember who said this on the podcast recently, but I think having a great product just gives you more room to get things right as well. Is what I've been kind of told is, if you're just relying purely on marketing, sales and branding, it can only kind of get you so far. But if you have a great product that is multiple times better than anything else on the market, there's more wiggle room and people are generally more understanding of things, which gives you a bit more time to get things right.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, if I have to use a product because I have an immediate need, but that the experience is just terrible, I'm less likely to go back to that. Whereas, if something didn't quite go right, but the product overall was really good, then I'm more likely to go back and give it another go.
Sure. Again, kind of diving a little bit deeper into the product side. It's, I guess, different for different people, but what does a really good product look like to you?
Look, I like to see products that are well designed from a user interface perspective, from the whole user kind of experience perspective, not just not what it looks like, but how it works as well. And I just see I know what I really like and I know what I really don't like, and you see kind of products that just cut corners, and the fonts don't match, or you go to put in your email address and it capitalizes the first letter in the field, and you think like there's just little things that good product people think about, that when they're not there, you realize, well, this isn't a real focus for them.
For non-technical founders, is that is that something that they should look for in technical founders that they bring on, or is that something, that attention to detail and that focus, is that something that you think is part of a really good founder, whether they're technical or not?
Yeah, I think it has to be driven by the founders, and you don't have to be technical to have that attention to detail. And a lot of technical people don't have that attention to detail as well. So, I see, you can usually tell, when an app launches and the founders have just sent the wireframes to a developer overseas, and you can tell that the app looks exactly like a wireframe, right? And, there's, in those cases, the founders, if they don't have that creative streak or that design kind of influence, then they really should look to get it. Get a designer in to design the app before you give it to a developer to just do it, because it makes such a difference.
I guess from an investment perspective as well, what are your views on having in-house versus outsourced development of products? So would you ever invest in I don't know if you have previously, but would you ever invest in a company that outsourced the development of their product?
I haven't, but I'm okay with outsourcing development, as long as there is a CTO in the founding team that can manage that outsourced team. So with Sittr, we do a lot of our development offshore, but that's because I'm the CTO and I know how to manage an offshore team, and I can also write code and review code and all that kind of stuff as well. So there's kind of fully just handing it off to a third party to do it, and then there's managing an outsourced team in-house. And I'm a fan of getting the best resources you can on your current budget. So if in the early stages you have to get that offshore, then that's fine. But I'm also very supportive of building tech teams in Australia and building more technical skills.
So I had Heidi and Lucy from Mentor Loop on, and they kind of spoke about how, as you just mentioned, to get that initial build up, to get to a particular point where they could actually sell into companies, they had to outsource it because they couldn't find the right CTO to come in.
Mm-hmm.
They've since transitioned and brought those kind of skill sets in-house.
Yeah.
Is there a particular time again? And in terms of just building teams as well, so you mentioned, it's important to have a CTO on there. I guess one of the things based off a lot of conversations that I've had, one of the hardest things for non-technical founders is to find not just a tech co-founder, but the right person. They generally go, great, you do development, do you want to come and join my team? Here's X% of equity. What's the, from a non-technical founder's perspective, what's the approach that they should take in finding a CTO? And if they are outsourcing that development, at what stage should they look to bring that in-house?
That's a great question. One which I haven't found the answer to yet. Co-founders, you have to have such a strong relationship with your co-founders. So, I'm not a fan of, co-founder speed dating type stuff where you can go and meet someone for 5 minutes and say, hey, we're going to go and start a company together. And I think a lot of non-technical founders and really non-technical founders who go and try and hire a technical co-founder, I think they really don't know what to look for, and it's very hard to kind of teach them what to look for as well. But I would say, look at things they've developed before. Look at whether they've worked within other startups, and spend a lot of time with them before you commit to make sure that this person really is the right fit.
Yeah, I think that due diligence process of going through that is something that's often overlooked as well. If it's the right person, you're going to be with them for 5-10 years, at least. It's important to get that right, and it's important to as you said, take the time to get to know them and just make sure that the fit's right on both sides.
Yeah, and I understand, you're really excited, you want to get your app out there before anyone else does and things like that, but I would say if you don't have a technical founder, then take the time to find the right person. Don't rush into it, because it'll come back to bite you. Absolutely.
So I guess as an angel investor, one of the things that can be really difficult for founders to get is to find the right person to put that initial kind of seed capital in outside of friends and family. I guess from your experience and the way that those kind of relationships with those founders came out, how should founders go about approaching and getting an angel investor like you on board to back their company?
Do your research. So start with a long list of potential angel investors, and look at what they do for a day job, look at what they other investments that they make, and try to find a match there. So someone who's, for example, I might look for someone who has worked in the childcare industry and likes investing in marketplaces or something like that, because just I guess kind of just sending your pitch deck out to hundreds of different potential investors is not a good strategy. Investors want a personalized kind of introduction. It can be a cold introduction, but they will very quickly glaze over something if the founder hasn't done their research to say, oh, well, this investor does make these kind of investments.
Sure. What's the best cold email that you've gotten?
The best cold email.
Or, I guess flipped another way, what's the ideal cold email for you?
Just short and to the point. Not a long-winded explanation of your life and how you got to where you are, but just what are you doing, why you think I would be interested, and if I decide not to invest, is there another way that you think I could help?
Yeah, fantastic. Finally, so you recently came out and said that you were the character behind VC Dundee, which, for those people that aren't familiar with it, was a Twitter persona, I guess you can call it that, which kind of just commented on different aspects of the ecosystem and startup life in general. Do you want to share a little bit about how that sort of came about and why that was sort of important for the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, it came about, I guess, kind of out of frustration, out of, I guess, curiosity, a bit of a social experiment. The startup Oz ecosystem had been, really booming, growing really quickly, and I just felt that, there was a lot of things, we needed to have a lot of kind of harder conversations about some things, and these weren't happening. It was just all, high fives and pat on the back and yes, great job. So I think rather than just come out, as myself and start making these commentaries, which I think, a lot of people would just, dismiss, or, you get blocked and people just, write you off as a troll or a troublemaker. I thought, maybe, a character should kind of reduce that friction in the process. And, it had been quite successful overseas with startup L Jackson. So I figured, Australia could do with one of these. So, fast follower type situation there.
So is that continuing on?
You know what? Some days I miss it. Some days, yes, I'm glad that I'm spending less time on Twitter because there's just so many other things to do. But yeah, watch this space. I'm thinking maybe he might make a little bit of a comeback, but maybe it might not be me behind it. So we'll see.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess really curious to know, does that, obviously that kind of changes the dynamic as well. I think that the reason why I guess the persona worked is that you can't associate it with any one person. And the trouble with doing commentary around meetings or just conversations that you overhear is that people can take that personally because they can relate into and understand who someone's who might be talking about in particular, which I guess is a little bit difficult to continue on once you actually come out and say who you are.
Yeah.
So what does the future look like for Sittr and you in general?
So Sittr has really big plans. We're seeing that we're having a real impact in the market, not just with helping parents, but also the sheer number of carers that have gone out and got qualifications because of our strict requirements. means that there's more qualified carers out there. So we really want to focus on doing that. So we're a bit of a social impact as well as for profit business, and we want to get it out of Australia and into some other markets as well. So that's kind of where the next 12 to 18 months are going to be for us. I still plan to keep angel investing, seed investing. There was talk of me raising a fund that was going to be a bit later stage. I decided that I wanted to stay earlier and help more founders in those early stages get their product right. So whether that ends up being a fund or just still angel investing, I'll still be around doing that.
Sure. So you mentioned that on the investment side you focus mainly on the B2B enterprise space.
Yep.
Any other sort of particular areas that you look at, or that you kind of focus on the investment side?
Not particularly. I mean, it's pretty broad across that. So there's SaaS businesses in that. There's marketplaces in that. There's I have an investment in a high-tech semiconductor company that's building a new thermal imager. So I'll kind of do anything along those lines. But yeah, I guess I have a company in the consumer space, but I'm not planning to make a lot more consumer focused investments.
Fantastic. So thanks so much for coming on the show today. For anyone that wants to say hello, find out more about you, about Sittr, or get in touch and send a cold email to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just email me, james@sittr.com, sittr.com.
Perfect. James, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks for tuning in to the Startup Playbook podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please don't forget to like, share, or subscribe. I'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, don't forget to check out some of the other interviews that we've already done. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.